You feel alone right now, not because the world has abandoned you, but because the version of yourself that once fit perfectly into your old life is quietly dying. And no one around you can see it happening. Nearly 2,000 years ago, a Roman emperor sat alone inside a cold military tent on the banks of the Danube River, surrounded by thousands of soldiers, yet deeply, completely alone in his thoughts. His name was Marcus Aurelius, and he was fighting a war he never wanted while governing an empire he never asked for. On those freezing nights, instead of sleeping, he opened a journal and wrote words that were never meant for anyone else to read. One of those entries would become one of the most powerful sentences ever written. You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. He was not writing philosophy for the public. He was writing to survive his own isolation. He was reminding himself that the loneliness he felt wasn't punishment. It was a signal that he had outgrown the world he was standing in. That is exactly where you are right now. The truth most people never fully confront is simple. You are not less than anyone. Not in intelligence, not in worth, not in the ability to build something extraordinary with your life. Yet somewhere along the way, comparison, doubt, criticism, and past mistakes slowly trained you to live beneath your own power. You learned to question yourself before taking action. You learned to measure your value through the opinions of people who cannot see your future. And every time you accepted that smaller version of yourself, you stepped further away from the person you were becoming. Today, that pattern ends. The Stoics understood something that modern psychology is only now confirming. Confidence is not a gift that some people receive and others do not. It is a decision, repeated every single day. Marcus Aurelius chose it every morning inside that tent. Epictetus chose it every day, as a man who had once been a slave. Seneca chose it, while writing letters from exile, stripped of everything he once owned. None of them waited for the world to tell them they were enough. They decided it first, and the world eventually adjusted. The way you show up shapes how the world responds to you, and the identity you choose to live from will determine the life you build. Strength is not something you stumble into by accident. It is something you build deliberately, decision by decision, habit by habit, day by day. Most people spend their lives waiting for strength the way others wait for luck. They believe one day they will wake up suddenly confident, suddenly disciplined, suddenly ready to take control of their lives. But strength does not arrive like a miracle. It appears like a structure that is built slowly and intentionally. The version of you that exists tomorrow is shaped by the choices you make today, not by the wishes you repeat in your mind. You cannot act like the best while thinking like the weakest version of yourself. If your identity is still tied to old failures, past embarrassment, criticism from others, or labels you accepted years ago, then every step forward will feel heavy. While your mind will keep pulling you back toward the familiar version of yourself that feels safe but small. This is where most people remain trapped for years, sometimes for their entire lives. Not because they lack ability, but because they never questioned the identity that was built for them by circumstances they did not choose. There was a man born into slavery in the Roman Empire around 50 AD. His name was Epictetus. He had no rights, no freedom, no control over his own body. His master once twisted his leg so violently that it broke and never healed properly, leaving him with a permanent limp for the rest of his life. According to the ancient accounts, while his leg was being twisted, Epictetus looked at his master calmly and said, "You are going to break it." And when it snapped, he simply said, "I told you so." He did not scream. He did not beg. He responded with a clarity that his master could not comprehend, because Epictetus had already made a decision that would define the rest of his life. His identity would never be determined by what happened to his body. He later gained his freedom, began teaching philosophy in Rome, and eventually became one of the most respected thinkers in the ancient world. A former slave, with a broken leg, teaching senators and future emperors how to think. He once said, "It is not things that disturb us, but our judgments about them." That single sentence carries more power than most people realize, because it reveals the deepest truth about human suffering. Your pain is real. Your struggle is real. But the story you attach to it is what determines whether it destroys you or transforms you. This is why real transformation never begins with results. It begins with identity. Outcomes do not create identity. Identity creates outcomes. A strong identity produces strong actions. Strong actions produce strong results. When your identity is fragile, every challenge shakes you. When your identity is solid, challenges become part of your growth. If Epictetus had accepted the identity that the world assigned to him, a crippled slave with no future, he would have disappeared from history without a trace. Instead, he chose a different identity, one built from the inside, one that no master and no empire could break. And that identity created a life that is still teaching millions of people how to think, nearly 2,000 years after his death. The first place where identity begins to rebuild is the beginning of your day. Your mornings are the command center of your life. Before the world begins making demands on your attention, before responsibilities and noise fill your mind, you have a small window where your mind is still yours. What you do during this time quietly sets the tone for every decision that follows. The strongest individuals do not negotiate with their mornings. They claim them. They protect them. They use them to place themselves into leadership over their own mind. Marcus Aurelius understood this more than almost anyone in history. He was the most powerful man in the Roman Empire, responsible for the lives of over 70 million people, managing wars, plagues, and political conspiracies every single day. Yet in his private journal, he admitted something remarkably honest. He struggled to get out of bed in the morning. He wrote to himself, "At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I have to go to work as a human being. What do I have to complain of if I am going to do what I was born for, the things which I was brought into the world to do?" The Emperor of Rome, the most disciplined Stoic who ever lived, had to convince himself to get up every single morning. He did not wake up feeling powerful. He did not open his eyes filled with motivation. He woke up tired, resistant, wanting to stay under the covers just like you do. The difference was not how he felt. The difference was what he did next. He got up anyway, because his identity was not built on how he felt in the moment. It was built on the standard he refused to abandon. When you wake up and immediately reach for your phone, you hand control of your attention to the outside world before you have even taken control of yourself. Someone else's emergency becomes your first thought. Someone else's highlight reel becomes your first comparison. Someone else's opinion becomes the first voice shaping your mood. And before you have even stood up, your confidence has already been quietly damaged by information that has nothing to do with your actual life. But when you begin your day intentionally, even with something simple, your mind shifts into a different state. 1 hour without digital noise allows your thoughts to stabilize. One intentional action that builds momentum, such as reading something meaningful, writing down your goals, or moving your body, reminds your nervous system that you are someone who takes action rather than someone who reacts. Your morning also becomes a ritual of identity. The words you speak to yourself during those first quiet minutes shape the direction of your entire day. When your mind is filled with doubt, hesitation, or criticism, Those thoughts become the script your behavior follows for the next 16 hours. But when you anchor your mind with deliberate identity statements, you interrupt the old patterns that used to control you. The Stoics called this the discipline of assent, the practice of choosing which thoughts you agree with and which thoughts you refuse to follow. Not every thought that enters your mind deserves your obedience. Most of them are echoes of a version of yourself that no longer exists. Simple declarations such as, "I show up, I am capable, I lead my life," are not empty phrases. They are psychological signals. They remind your mind who is in charge. Over time, these statements reshape how you see yourself, and the way you see yourself determines how you act. However, rituals alone are not enough. Building the strongest version of yourself requires rewriting the internal story you carry about who you are. Many people unknowingly repeat a narrative inside their mind that keeps them small. They tell themselves they are not disciplined enough, not talented enough, not confident enough, or not ready yet. Every time this internal story repeats, it reinforces the identity that created your current limitations. If you want to grow into someone stronger, you must learn to challenge those thoughts instead of accepting them automatically. When your mind says you cannot handle something, pause and question it. When it reminds you of past mistakes, respond with your present intention. When it tries to convince you that you are not ready, remind yourself that readiness is built through action, not waiting. This is not self-deception. It is mental discipline. It is the deliberate practice of directing your mind instead of allowing your mind to direct you. Standards play a critical role in this transformation. Your standards define what you tolerate from yourself and what you refuse to accept. They determine how you speak to yourself, how you manage your attention, how you treat your body, and how you handle your commitments. Marcus Aurelius held the highest political office in the known world, yet his personal standards were not about power or wealth. They were about character. Every night he reviewed his own actions, questioned his own decisions, and held himself accountable to principles that no one was forcing him to follow. If your standards are low, your actions will quietly drift downward. If your standards are high, your decisions automatically begin rising to meet them. A strong identity refuses to shrink to accommodate weak habits. It replaces those habits with behaviors that align with the future you are building. It is important to understand that strength is not intensity. Anyone can feel motivated for a few days. Anyone can push themselves when excitement is high. But real strength is consistency. It is the ability to act on your standards, even when motivation disappears. It is the quiet discipline of doing the work on days when progress feels slow and invisible. Consistency may not look dramatic in the moment, but over time, it builds a foundation that cannot be shaken. Identity-based habits are powerful because they last longer than emotions. Feelings change from day to day. Motivation rises and falls, but identity remains stable. When you begin asking yourself a different question each day, your behavior changes. Instead of asking what you feel like doing, ask what action aligns with the person you are becoming. This single shift moves your focus away from temporary emotion and toward long-term identity. Building the strongest version of yourself also requires honesty. You must be willing to see where you have been undisciplined, where you have made excuses, and where comfort has repeatedly defeated growth. This honesty is not meant to shame you. It is meant to wake you up. Self-awareness allows correction, and correction builds trust with yourself, and self-trust becomes the foundation of inner strength. The Stoics had a word for this kind of radical self-examination. They called it prosoche, the practice of constant attention to your own thoughts, judgments, and actions. It was not a punishment. It was a form of respect toward the person you were capable of becoming. The moment you decide to lead your mind instead of following it, your life begins to shift. Your thoughts change first, then your posture changes, then your decisions change. Eventually, the world notices the difference in the way you speak, move, and carry yourself. Strength becomes visible because it was first built internally. You are not simply building habits. You are building a mindset, a character, and an identity strong enough to carry the future you want to create. And that identity cannot grow inside a noisy mind. Every day, your mind wakes up with the potential to think clearly, create ideas, and move toward the life you want to build. Yet most people place their minds immediately into environments filled with noise, endless scrolling, constant comparison, opinions from strangers, and information that has nothing to do with their future. Before the day even truly begins, their confidence has already taken a hit. Noise does not simply distract you. Noise reshapes you. It pulls your attention away from the voice that matters most, your own. Nearly 2,000 years ago, a man named Seneca stood at the center of Roman power. He was one of the wealthiest men in the empire, a personal advisor to Emperor Nero, a celebrated playwright, and one of the most brilliant Stoic philosophers who ever lived. Then one day, without warning, everything was taken from him. Nero turned against him and banished him to the island of Corsica, a barren, isolated place at the edge of the known world. Seneca lost his home, his wealth, his status, his library, his social circle, and his influence overnight. Most men in his position would have collapsed under the weight of that loss. But Seneca did something that revealed the depth of his philosophy. He sat down and began writing. Not complaints, not appeals for mercy. He wrote letters about how to live well. He wrote about time, about grief, about anger, about the shortness of life. Stripped of every external marker of identity, Seneca discovered that the only thing no emperor could exile was his mind. And because he had spent decades training that mind, it remained steady when everything else crumbled. He later wrote, "How much time he gains who does not look to see what his neighbor says or does or thinks, but only at what he does himself, to make it just and right." That was not a casual observation. That was a survival strategy written by a man who had lost everything except the one thing that actually mattered. Many people believe their biggest struggle is a lack of discipline or a lack of clarity. But the deeper problem is that their minds are overcrowded. When your mind is filled with hundreds of voices, it becomes impossible to hear your own direction. Your attention becomes fragmented, your energy becomes scattered, and your identity slowly weakens. You cannot build a powerful life while your mind is constantly reacting to every signal around you. Seneca understood this from exile. With no distractions, on no social obligations, and no external noise, his thinking became sharper than it had ever been. The isolation that was designed to destroy him became the very condition that produced his greatest work. Your attention is the most valuable currency you possess. Where your attention goes, your thoughts grow. Where your thoughts grow, your identity forms. And where your identity forms, your future follows. This means every piece of information you allow into your mind either strengthens the person you are becoming or weakens it. The wrong input slowly erodes confidence. The right input strengthens belief and focus. Protecting your mind is not an optional practice. It is survival in a world that constantly competes for your attention. One of the first steps to reclaiming control is learning how to create intentional silence. The human brain was not designed to process thousands of pieces of information before breakfast. When your mind is overloaded with stimulation, it cannot think deeply. It can only react. The Stoics called this state a passion, not in the romantic sense, but in the original meaning of the word, a state where you are being acted upon instead of acting from your own will. When your mind is constantly reacting, you are not living your life. You are being lived by the information flowing through you. This is why periods of uninterrupted focus are so powerful. A simple 90-minute focus block can begin changing how your mind operates. During this time, every notification is turned off, every distraction is removed, and your full attention is directed towards something meaningful. In that space, you stop reacting and begin creating. Silence also allows you to reconnect with your own thinking. When the noise fades, your mind begins to organize itself again. Ideas appear more clearly. Decisions become easier. Confidence begins to rebuild because you are no longer constantly comparing your life to the lives of others. Instead, you begin paying attention to your own direction. Clarity grows in quiet environments. Confusion grows in chaotic ones. Another powerful practice is deciding intentionally what voices are allowed into your mind. Most people allow information into their heads randomly, whatever the algorithm serves, whatever notification arrives, whatever conversation pulls them in. But strong individuals treat their attention like a guarded space. The Stoics understood this instinctively. Marcus Aurelius, as emperor, had access to every form of entertainment, as gossip and distraction that ancient Rome could offer. Instead of consuming all of it, he deliberately narrowed his inputs to philosophy, duty, and self-reflection. He treated his mind the way a general treats a fortress. Not every visitor is allowed through the gates. Imagine creating a mental whitelist and blacklist. The whitelist includes the voices that strengthen your identity, the mentors you learn from, the ideas that push you to grow, and the information that expands your thinking. These sources feed your development and remind you who you are becoming. The blacklist contains the sources that weaken your focus, content that triggers comparison, voices that constantly criticize, conversations that drain your energy, and platforms that keep your mind scattered. When you begin filtering what enters your mind, why don't you begin shaping your identity with intention? Your attention stops being a doorway that anyone can walk through. It becomes a fortress you protect carefully. There is another form of noise that is even more dangerous than the noise of the outside world. It is the noise inside your own head. Even when the phone is turned off and the room is quiet, your mind can still replay old doubts and negative beliefs. Thoughts that say you are not ready, not capable, or not good enough. These internal voices often come from past experiences, criticism, or moments where you doubted yourself. If left untrained, they continue repeating themselves until they shape your behavior. Epictetus spent years teaching his students that the greatest battlefield is not the arena or the Senate floor. It is the space between your own ears. He told them that a person who cannot govern their own impressions will be governed by everything else. The external world is unpredictable. Other people are unpredictable. But your response to your own thoughts, that is the one territory where you have absolute authority. Guarding your mind means learning to speak to yourself with leadership instead of fear. When doubt appears, do not allow it to dominate your thinking. Acknowledge the thought, then replace it with a deliberate direction. Remind yourself that your mind is your territory, and you decide what grows inside it. Over time, this mental discipline strengthens your internal voice and weakens the power of negative self-talk. Solitude becomes an important part of this process. Many people fear being alone with their thoughts because silence reveals what they have been avoiding. But solitude is not isolation. It is leverage. It is where the strongest ideas develop, where clarity returns, and where identity strengthens. Seneca discovered this on Corsica. Marcus Aurelius discovered this in his tent by the Danube. Epictetus discovered this in the quiet hours after his students left. When you sit with yourself without distraction, you remember who you are and where you are going. As your mind becomes quieter, something powerful begins to happen. The world outside you starts losing its ability to control your emotions. Criticism becomes less intimidating. Comparison becomes less relevant. Random opinions stop shaping your decisions. You stop reacting impulsively and begin responding deliberately. Instead of absorbing everything around you, you choose what deserves your attention. To ask yourself a question most people avoid. What voices have I allowed into my mind that do not belong there? What information am I consuming that weakens my focus? What distractions have I normalized that are slowly stealing my potential? These questions are not meant to create guilt. They are meant to wake you up to the power of your attention. Once you understand that your attention builds your identity, and your identity builds your future, everything changes. Protecting your mind becomes a priority instead of an afterthought. Silence becomes valuable instead of uncomfortable. And focus becomes your greatest advantage in a world that constantly tries to scatter your energy. A disciplined mind does not fear the noise of the world because it has learned how to guard the space where identity is built. From believing in your future before anyone else does is one of the most defining abilities a person can develop. There will be moments in your life when no one sees what you see. No one understands the direction you are trying to move toward. No one applauds the effort you are putting in. In those quiet seasons, many people begin to doubt themselves. They interpret the absence of recognition as proof that their path is wrong. But the truth is that every meaningful vision begins in isolation. Before the world believes in you, you must first believe in yourself. A former slave with a permanent limp stood in front of a small room in Nicopolis, a forgotten town on the western coast of Greece. His name was Epictetus, and he had no wealth, no political connections, and no family name to open doors for him. The students who came to hear him speak were not drawn by his reputation or his status. He had neither. They came because something in the way he carried himself communicated a certainty that most free men never possessed. He taught without notes, without a stage, and without any external proof that his words mattered. No publisher printed his ideas. No emperor endorsed his school. For years, his classroom was a quiet room where a handful of people gathered to listen to a man the world had every reason to ignore. Yet he continued teaching, day after day, with the same conviction, because his belief in the value of what he carried inside was not dependent on anyone else confirming it. He once said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." That was not theory for Epictetus. That was autobiography. He had mastered himself long before the world gave him permission to matter, and that internal mastery eventually became the foundation of a philosophy that shaped the thinking of emperors, generals, and scholars for centuries after his death. Self-belief is not a temporary emotion that appears when things are going well. It is a discipline that must be practiced every day. Most people misunderstand confidence because they assume it comes after success. They believe once they achieve something impressive, they will finally feel certain about themselves. In reality, the process works in the opposite direction. Belief comes first. Action follows belief, and success eventually grows from repeated action. Waiting for the world to validate you before believing in yourself is like waiting for a harvest before planting the seed. The Stoics understood this deeply. They called it the Inner Citadel, a fortress inside your mind that remains standing regardless of what collapses around you. Your inner citadel is not built from praise or achievement. It is built from the quiet daily decision to trust yourself when no external evidence supports that trust yet. Many people have experienced being underestimated. They have worked hard, while others ignored their effort. They have shared ideas that were dismissed or overlooked. They have moved forward while people around them questioned their ability. These experiences can easily create a sense of invisibility. You begin to wonder if your effort matters or if your vision is unrealistic. But recognition has never been the true measure of your worth. Your worth is defined by your commitment, for your resilience, and your willingness to continue building even when no one is watching. Marcus Aurelius led the Roman Empire for nearly 20 years, and for most of that time, he was not celebrated. He was criticized. Senators questioned his military decisions. Philosophers debated his policies. Generals doubted his strategies. Yet every single night, after the politics and the arguments had ended, he sat alone and wrote in his journal not to defend himself, but to hold himself accountable to the person he was becoming. He never published those writings. He never showed them to anyone. His belief in his own path did not require an audience. One powerful way to strengthen belief in yourself is through evidence. Confidence grows when your mind begins to trust your actions. Every day you have an opportunity to collect small pieces of proof that you are moving forward. A single completed task, a difficult conversation handled with courage, or a step taken toward a goal becomes evidence that you are someone who acts. These small victories may seem insignificant in the moment, but they accumulate inside your mind. Over time, your brain begins to see a pattern. You are not someone who only talks about change. You are someone who follows through. The Stoics practiced this through a nightly exercise they called the evening review. Before sleep, they would examine the day just past. Where did I act with virtue? Where did I fall short? What can I do differently tomorrow? This was not self-punishment. It was evidence collection. Each honest review strengthened their trust in their own ability to improve, and that trust quietly built the kind of confidence that does not collapse under pressure. Another method for strengthening belief is reminding yourself why your future matters. Many people pursue goals without clearly understanding their deeper reasons. When difficulty appears, they quickly lose direction because the purpose behind their effort was never fully defined. Take time to reflect on the reasons you must succeed, not to impress anyone else, not to compete with others, but to honor the life you want to build. Your reasons may include freedom, growth, contribution, or the desire to become the strongest version of yourself. When your purpose becomes clear, doubt loses some of its power. Seneca wrote extensively about this from exile. He argued that a life without clear purpose is like a ship without a rudder. It moves constantly, but arrives nowhere. The moment you define what your life is for, every distraction becomes easier to refuse, and every difficult day becomes easier to endure. Visualization can also reinforce belief. Spend a few moments each day imagining the person you are becoming. Do not treat it as fantasy. Treat it as rehearsal. Picture the way you stand, the way you speak, the way you approach challenges with calm focus. Imagine the discipline you maintain, the obstacles you overcome, and the character you develop along the way. The Stoics practiced a version of this they called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of adversity. They did not only visualize success, they visualized the obstacles, the failures and the setbacks that would appear along the way, so that when those moments arrived, their minds were already prepared. Your mind responds strongly to repeated images. When you regularly visualize your future self, your brain begins to treat that identity as something real and attainable. And when you also prepare for the difficulties that will accompany that future, your resilience grows alongside your belief. However, the greatest challenge to belief often comes from your own internal dialogue. The mind has a tendency to repeat familiar thoughts, especially the ones connected to past failure. When your mind whispers that you are not ready or that you might fail again, you must respond deliberately. Do not allow those thoughts to pass unchallenged. Replace them with a direction that reflects who you are becoming. When your mind says this is impossible, remind yourself that every achievement begins as something unfamiliar. When your mind says you are not prepared, remind yourself that preparation grows through action. Epictetus taught his students that an untrained mind is like an untamed horse. It will carry you, but never where you want to go. The moment you begin training your internal dialogue, you take the reins of your own direction. There will be days when belief feels fragile. Progress may appear slow. Results may remain invisible. In those moments, it is easy to think that quitting would be easier than continuing. But this is precisely the moment when belief becomes most important. The strongest individuals do not wait for perfect certainty before moving forward. They continue taking action even while uncertainty exists. Their belief is not loud or dramatic. It is quiet, steady, and persistent. The world rarely supports a vision in its early stages. People often need to see evidence before they offer encouragement. That is simply human nature. But if you depend entirely on external support, your progress will always remain fragile. True belief must come from within. It must be built from your own commitment to the person you are becoming. Every day you choose to act in alignment with that future, your belief strengthens a little more. Eventually, the pattern begins to change. The actions you repeat become habits. The habits reinforce your identity, and the identity begins producing results that others can finally see. When that happens, people may suddenly appear supportive or impressed, but by that point, their approval no longer determines your direction. You have already proven to yourself that your belief was justified. The most important supporter of your future must always be you. When you wake up, remind yourself that you are responsible for protecting the vision you carry. When doubt appears, answer it with action. When progress feels slow, remember that belief is built through persistence. The future belongs to those who trust their path long enough to walk it. And the moment you truly believe in your own potential is the moment you begin shaping a life that others once thought impossible. Most people underestimate how strongly their presence influences the way others respond to them. They walk into rooms with hesitation, their shoulders slightly lowered, their voice uncertain, their energy quiet as if they are asking for permission to exist. When you present yourself this way, the world reflects that uncertainty back to you. People overlook you, interrupt you, or assume you have little to offer. Not because you lack ability, but because your presence signals doubt before your actions have a chance to speak. Showing up with the energy of the best is not arrogance. It is alignment. It is the decision to act from the version of yourself you are becoming instead of the fears that used to control you. The Stoics had a word for this alignment. They called it living according to nature, which did not mean living in the woods or rejecting society. It meant expressing outwardly what you genuinely are inwardly. When your posture, your voice, and your behavior reflect the same identity you are building inside, you stop performing confidence and start embodying it. Confidence does not magically appear after success. It grows through the repeated act of carrying yourself like someone who belongs where you stand. When you begin behaving from that identity, your mind slowly adjusts to the new standard you are setting. When Marcus Aurelius was 17 years old, Emperor Hadrian personally selected him as the future ruler of Rome. Overnight, this quiet, bookish young man found himself surrounded by senators who had spent decades building political power, generals who had commanded legions across 3 continents, and advisors who had manipulated emperors before him. Every one of them was older, louder, and more experienced. Yet the ancient historians record something remarkable about how the young Marcus carried himself in those early days. He did not try to match their volume. He did not rush his words to prove his intelligence, and he did not perform authority the way others expected. Instead, he entered rooms with a calm that unsettled people far more than aggression ever could. He listened longer than anyone expected. He paused before responding. And when he finally spoke, his words carried weight precisely because they had not been wasted on filling silence. Decades later, he would write in his journal, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." That sentence wasn't advice for others. It was a reminder to himself that presence isn't a performance. It is the visible expression of an identity that has already been decided. Your body plays a powerful role in shaping your internal state. The way you stand, the way you breathe, the way you move all send signals to your nervous system. When your posture collapses, or your mind often follows with uncertainty. When you stand tall, open your chest, and lift your head slightly, your body communicates stability and control. Even a few minutes of intentional posture can shift your mental state. Your brain interprets these signals as readiness. Instead of shrinking, you begin expanding into the space around you. The Stoics practiced physical discipline not for vanity, but because they understood the connection between the body and the mind. Seneca wrote that the body is the servant of the soul, and a servant that is neglected will eventually fail to carry out its duties. How you hold your body is not a superficial concern. It is a direct reflection of how you hold your thoughts. Movement also communicates identity. People who feel uncertain tend to move quickly or nervously. Their gestures are scattered, their steps rushed, their attention constantly shifting. But someone who carries strong presence moves differently. Their movements are calm, deliberate, and controlled. They do not rush their actions because they are not trying to escape attention. They accept the space they occupy and use it with intention. This quiet control naturally draws respect from others. Marcus Aurelius was known for this exact quality. Ancient sources describe him as a man who moved through the chaos of imperial Rome as though he were still sitting in meditation, unhurried, undisturbed, fully present in whatever he was doing. That stillness wasn't passivity. It was the outward expression of a mind that had been trained to remain steady regardless of external pressure. Another important element of presence is initiative. Many people wait to be acknowledged before they contribute. They wait to be asked before speaking. They wait for validation before offering value. But leaders do not wait for permission to participate. They create momentum by acting first. They greet others first, ask thoughtful questions first, and share ideas without hesitation. This behavior signals confidence and responsibility. Epictetus taught his students that waiting for external conditions to be perfect before you act is the strategy of a person who will never act at all. He said the only preparation that matters is the preparation you give yourself through repeated practice. And practice begins with initiative, not permission. When you consistently take initiative, the environment around you begins to adjust to your energy. Your voice is another reflection of your identity. From speech that is rushed or uncertain often communicates hesitation even when the message itself is valuable. Speaking with clarity and calm pacing allows your words to carry greater weight. When you slow down slightly, pronounce your words clearly, and pause between thoughts, people naturally pay more attention. Authority in communication is rarely about volume. It is about control and intention. Seneca observed that the wise man speaks as though placing each word deliberately on a scale, not to impress, but to ensure that nothing unnecessary is added and nothing essential is left out. Your voice is not simply a tool for delivering information. It is a signal that tells the world how seriously you take your own thoughts. Energy is contagious in every environment. The emotional state you carry into a room influences the atmosphere around you. If you enter with anxiety and self-doubt, that tension quietly spreads. But when you enter with calm focus and grounded confidence, others begin responding to that stability. This does not require forcing enthusiasm or pretending to be someone you are not. Authentic presence comes from internal alignment. When your thoughts, posture, and behavior reflect the same identity, your energy becomes consistent. Many people hold themselves back because they fear judgment. They imagine others constantly analyzing their behavior and waiting for mistakes. In reality, most people are far more focused on their own insecurities than on evaluating yours. When you release the fear of being perfectly approved by everyone, you regain freedom in how you express yourself. Now, your responsibility is not to satisfy every opinion. Your responsibility is to represent the standards you have chosen for your life. Marcus Aurelius governed an empire filled with people who constantly judged him, yet he wrote, "It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own." That contradiction is one of the deepest traps of human psychology, and the moment you recognize it, you begin to free yourself from its grip. Consistency is what transforms presence into identity. Acting confident once does not create lasting change. But when you repeatedly show up with intentional posture, controlled movement, and proactive behavior, these actions begin to feel natural. Your nervous system adapts to the new pattern. What once required effort becomes your baseline way of operating. Your external presence must also match your internal dialogue. If your mind constantly repeats that you do not belong, your body will eventually mirror that belief. But when your internal voice reinforces the identity you are building, your behavior follows naturally. Remind yourself regularly that you are someone who contributes, someone who leads, someone who brings value wherever you go. This internal clarity strengthens the energy you project outward. Showing up with the energy of the best does not mean believing you are superior to everyone else. It means recognizing that you have the right to fully occupy the space of your own life. When your presence becomes steady and intentional, people feel it before they analyze it. They notice the calm in your movement, the certainty in your voice, and the clarity in your actions. Opportunities begin to appear not because you demanded attention, but because your presence signals that you are prepared to handle responsibility. Over time, this consistent energy becomes part of your identity, shaping how others perceive you and how you perceive yourself. Becoming the strongest version of yourself does not only require building new beliefs and new behaviors. It also requires removing everything that quietly weakens your confidence. Many people focus only on addition. They read more books, try new routines, and set ambitious goals. But they ignore the things in their lives that are slowly draining their energy and damaging their identity. Growth is not only about what you add, it is also about what you remove. If you continue holding on to the habits, and environments and relationships that pull you downward, your progress will always feel limited. Seneca was once the richest man in Rome. His wealth was estimated at 300 million sesterces, an amount so vast that it made him one of the wealthiest individuals in the entire history of the Roman Empire. He owned estates across Italy, had access to the finest food, the most luxurious clothing, and every comfort the ancient world could provide. Yet toward the end of his life, when Emperor Nero began tightening his grip and the political environment became increasingly dangerous, Seneca did something that shocked everyone around him. He went to Nero and voluntarily offered to return all of his wealth, every estate, every coin, every possession. Nero refused the offer, but the gesture revealed something profound about how Seneca understood strength. He had spent years writing about how attachment to external things weakens the mind, and when the moment came to practice what he had preached, he was willing to let everything go. He wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a great deal of it. Life is long enough, and a sufficiently generous amount has been given to us for the highest achievements, if it were all well invested." For Seneca, cutting what weakens you was not loss. It was liberation. Every unnecessary attachment you release creates space for something that actually serves the person you are becoming. Confidence is extremely sensitive to what you tolerate. Every thought you repeat, every habit you practice, and every person you surround yourself with sends signals to your mind about who you believe you are. If you repeatedly tolerate environments that make you feel small, your identity slowly adapts to that message. If you constantly engage in behaviors that contradict your goals, your mind begins to doubt your own words. Self-trust weakens when your actions repeatedly betray your intentions. The first place to examine is your internal dialogue. The way you speak to yourself when no one is listening shapes your emotional state more than any external factor. Many people are far harsher with themselves than they would ever be with another person. They replay past failures, criticize their own abilities, and remind themselves of every mistake they have made. Over time, this pattern becomes a mental habit, and your mind begins to expect failure because you have trained it to focus on weakness instead of growth. Marcus Aurelius was acutely aware of this danger. Despite being the most powerful man in the world, he wrote in his journal entries that could easily be mistaken for self-criticism, questioning whether he was patient enough, disciplined enough, kind enough. But there was a crucial difference between his self-examination and destructive self-talk. He examined himself in order to improve, never in order to condemn. He approached his own faults the way a physician approaches a wound, with precision, with care, and with the clear intention of healing rather than harming. Cutting what weakens you means interrupting the destructive dialogue. When your mind begins repeating negative assumptions about yourself, pause and question the thought. Ask whether it reflects your current effort or simply echoes an old version of yourself. Replace the criticism with constructive direction. Speak to yourself as someone who is developing strength, not someone who is permanently defined by past mistakes. Your internal voice should guide improvement rather than destroy confidence. The next area to evaluate is the people around you. Human beings are deeply influenced by their social environment. The attitudes, beliefs, and emotional patterns of the people you spend time with gradually affect how you see the world. Some individuals encourage growth, challenge your thinking, and celebrate your progress. Others unintentionally drain your energy by focusing on negativity, doubt, or constant complaint. Neither group may intend harm, but the impact on your identity is very different. Epictetus was direct about this in his teachings. He told his students, "If you wish to improve, be content to appear foolish and stupid with regard to external things. Do not wish to be thought to know anything." He was warning them that the people who resist your growth are often the same people who once felt comfortable with your limitations. When you begin improving your life, certain relationships may become uncomfortable. Some people prefer the version of you that was less ambitious because it allows them to remain comfortable with their own choices. When you grow, your progress may quietly challenge the beliefs they hold about themselves. This tension does not mean you must remove every relationship from your life. It means you must become intentional about the level of influence each person has over your thinking. Protecting your mindset is not selfish. It is necessary for building the future you want. Habits are another powerful factor in shaping identity. Many habits seem small, yet they gradually influence how you see yourself. Repeatedly delaying important work teaches your mind that you cannot rely on your own discipline. Breaking promises to yourself weakens self-respect. Constantly filling your time with distractions trains your brain to avoid focus and responsibility. Each of these patterns chips away at confidence because they contradict the standards you want to live by. Seneca observed this pattern in the people around him in Rome. He saw men of enormous talent wasting their days on banquets, gossip, and political games, while their potential slowly disappeared beneath layers of comfortable habit. He wrote that most people do not lose their lives all at once. They give them away in small pieces, so gradually that they never notice what has been lost until it is too late. To change this pattern, you must perform an honest evaluation of your routines. Identify the behaviors that drain your energy or reinforce procrastination. Be willing to remove them completely rather than negotiating small compromises. When you eliminate a habit that weakens your discipline, you create space for a habit that strengthens it. Over time, these replacements rebuild trust between your intentions and your actions. Your physical environment also plays a role in reinforcing identity. A cluttered space often produces a cluttered mind. When your surroundings are chaotic, your attention becomes scattered and your motivation decreases. Creating an organized environment is not about perfection. It is about supporting clarity. When the spaces where you work and live reflect order and intention, your mind begins to mirror that structure. The Stoics practiced this through simplicity. Marcus Aurelius, despite having access to the most extravagant palaces in the empire, chose to sleep on a simple bed and eat modest meals. He was not performing humility. He was removing the distractions that would weaken his focus on what actually mattered: his character, his decisions, and his duty. One of the most important shifts you can make is refusing to tolerate what contradicts your standards. Every time you allow something that weakens you to remain in your life, you send a message that your goals are negotiable. When you remove those influences, you send a different message. You remind yourself that the person you are becoming deserves an environment that supports growth. This process is rarely comfortable. Old habits resist change. Familiar environments pull you back, and excuses appear when discipline feels inconvenient. But courage grows when you consistently choose the stronger path instead of the easier one. Each time you remove something that drains your confidence, you strengthen the foundation of your identity. Eventually, the difference becomes visible. Your energy stabilizes because fewer distractions compete for your attention. Your decisions align more clearly with your values. Your confidence stops feeling fragile because the things that once weakened it no longer control your environment. By removing what erodes your strength, you create the conditions necessary for lasting growth. Confidence is no longer something you hope to feel. It becomes a natural result of the life you intentionally protect. Your life begins to change the moment you stop negotiating responsibility. As long as you continue explaining your situation through excuses, your power remains limited. Excuses feel safe because they protect the ego. They allow you to believe that circumstances, other people, or bad timing are the real reasons progress has not happened yet. But every excuse quietly weakens your identity. It tells your mind that your life is controlled by forces outside of you. And the moment you believe that, your motivation slowly disappears because you no longer feel responsible for shaping your own future. Ownership is the opposite of that mindset. Ownership means recognizing that while you cannot control every circumstance in your life, you are always responsible for how you respond to it. No Stoic philosopher understood this more deeply than Epictetus, and no one had more reason to reject it. The story of his broken leg is well known, but what most people miss is what came after. After his master crippled him, and after he eventually gained his freedom, Epictetus did not spend his years seeking revenge or demanding justice for what had been done to his body. He walked with a limp for the rest of his life, and he never once used that limp as a reason to stop building. Instead, he built an entire school of philosophy around a single principle. There are things within our control and things outside of our control, and the quality of your life depends entirely on which category you choose to focus on. He called this the dichotomy of control, and it became the foundation of everything he taught. Your leg can be broken, your wealth can be taken, your reputation can be destroyed. But your response, your judgment, your decision about who you are in the face of what happens to you, that belongs to you and no one else. He once said, "Do not seek for things to happen the way you want them to. Rather wish that what happens happen the way it happens, and you will be happy." That was not passive acceptance. That was the most radical form of personal responsibility ever articulated. The refusal to waste your energy on what you cannot change, so that every ounce of strength flows toward what you can. Strong individuals do not wait for perfect conditions to begin improving themselves. They accept the situation they are in and immediately start asking a different question. Instead of asking why something happened to them, they ask what they can do next. This shift in thinking moves you from a passive role in your life to an active one. The first step toward absolute responsibility is honest self-reflection. You must be willing to look at your current life without hiding behind comfortable explanations. Ask yourself where you have delayed action, where you have blamed others for problems you could have addressed, and where you have allowed fear to control your decisions. This kind of reflection can feel uncomfortable, but it is also extremely liberating. The moment you accept responsibility for your situation, you reclaim the ability to change it. Marcus Aurelius practiced this every single night. After a full day of governing the empire, managing wars, and resolving political disputes, he did not reward himself with entertainment or distraction. He sat alone, reviewed his own conduct, and asked himself the most honest questions a person can ask. Where did I fail today? Where was I weak? What must I do differently tomorrow? He held himself to a higher standard than he held anyone else, not because he enjoyed the discomfort, but because he understood that self-accountability is the engine of genuine transformation. Once you take ownership, every action becomes meaningful. The smallest decision begins to shape your identity. Waking up when you said you would wake up. Completing a task you promised yourself you would finish. Maintaining discipline even when no one is watching. All reinforce the message that you are someone who can be trusted. Self-trust grows when your actions repeatedly match your commitments. And self-trust is one of the strongest forms of confidence you can develop. Progress does not require dramatic transformation overnight. It requires consistent improvement over time. Even a small step forward each day compounds into powerful results when repeated long enough. This principle was central to Stoic practice. The Stoics did not believe in sudden enlightenment or miraculous breakthroughs. They believed in daily progress. Small, steady, unglamorous steps that quietly accumulate until the distance traveled becomes impossible to deny. Improving just a little every day gradually builds momentum that becomes impossible to ignore. At first, the progress feels small, but the accumulated effect over months and years becomes extraordinary. However, responsibility is truly tested during moments of resistance. There will be days when you feel tired, discouraged, or tempted to stop pushing forward. These are the moments that separate intention from identity. Anyone can work hard when motivation is high. Anyone can stay disciplined when the process feels exciting. But the people who truly transform their lives are the ones who continue acting when their emotions tell them to stop. Seneca wrote about this with characteristic bluntness. He said that a gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials. The discomfort you feel when you want to quit is not a signal that something is wrong. It is the friction that is shaping you into something stronger. When the thought of quitting appears, your mind will begin offering reasons that sound reasonable. It may say you deserve a break, that the effort is too exhausting, or that waiting until tomorrow will make things easier. These thoughts are extremely persuasive because they promise relief from discomfort. But the moment you follow them, you reinforce the habit of retreating whenever progress becomes difficult. A powerful way to resist this pattern is by committing to what can be called the one more principle. When your mind urges you to stop, decide to do just one more step, one more minute of focus, one more repetition of effort, one more page of work, one more attempt at solving the problem in front of you. These small acts of persistence may appear insignificant, but they have a profound psychological effect. They teach your brain that discomfort is not a signal to quit. It is simply part of the process of growth. Each time you continue despite resistance, you strengthen your mental resilience. Your mind begins to recognize that you are capable of pushing beyond temporary fatigue. Over time, this pattern becomes automatic. Instead of avoiding difficulty, you start moving toward it, because you understand that those moments are shaping the strongest version of yourself. Responsibility also requires emotional control. When obstacles appear, it is easy to react with frustration or discouragement. But reacting emotionally often leads to impulsive decisions that move you further away from your goals. The Stoics trained themselves to pause between the event and their response. Marcus Aurelius called this the space where a human being lives, not in what happens to you, but in the moment between what happens and how you choose to react. Acting with intention allows you to stay aligned with the identity you are building. Rather than allowing circumstances to dictate your mood, you maintain focus on the direction you have chosen. The people who achieve meaningful progress in life share one powerful habit. They remain loyal to their future even when the present moment feels uncomfortable. They understand that comfort is temporary, but the identity they are building will shape the rest of their lives. By continuing to act with responsibility and persistence, they prove to themselves that their goals are not just ideas, they are commitments. When you adopt this mindset, where every challenge becomes an opportunity to strengthen your character, difficult situations stop feeling like barriers and start feeling like training. Each time you refuse to surrender to excuses or fatigue, you reinforce the belief that you are capable of more than your previous limits suggested. Over time, your identity shifts in a powerful way. You no longer see yourself as someone waiting for the right moment to begin. You see yourself as the person who creates momentum through action. Responsibility stops feeling like a burden and becomes a source of freedom. Because when you truly own your life, you also own the power to shape where it goes next. The most difficult stage of growth is not the beginning when motivation is high, and it is not the end when success becomes visible. Well, the most difficult stage is the middle, the quiet season where you are working consistently, yet the results remain invisible. This is the stage where most people lose faith. They begin questioning whether their effort matters. They look around and see others moving faster, receiving recognition, or achieving results sooner. Slowly, doubt appears, and the temptation to abandon the process grows stronger. But real transformation almost always happens beneath the surface, long before it becomes visible to anyone else. Just as roots grow underground before a tree rises above the soil, Your identity is developing quietly, long before your results appear. Every disciplined decision, every focused hour, and every moment where you continue despite discomfort is shaping a stronger version of yourself. The progress may not be visible yet, but it is happening inside your habits, your thinking, and your character. Marcus Aurelius spent 19 years leading the Roman Empire through what historians now call one of the most devastating periods in ancient history. For nearly 2 decades, he faced constant war along the northern borders, a catastrophic plague that killed between 5 and 10 million people across the empire, betrayal from one of his most trusted generals, economic collapse, and political instability that threatened to destroy everything Rome had built over centuries. There was no single glorious victory that defined his reign. There was no dramatic turning point where the world suddenly celebrated his efforts. Instead, there were 19 years of showing up, making difficult decisions with incomplete information, and enduring loss after loss, and writing in his journal every night, despite having no evidence that anything was getting better. Most of the problems he faced during his lifetime were never fully resolved. The wars continued, the plague returned, the political tensions remained. Yet every single night he opened that journal and held himself accountable to the same principles he had committed to as a young man. He never saw the full results of his perseverance. He died in a military camp, far from Rome, still managing a crisis that had no clear end. But the journal he left behind, the one he never intended for anyone to read, became one of the most influential books in human history. He wrote in those pages, "Do not act as if you had 10,000 years to throw away. Death stands at your elbow. And be good for something while you live and it is in your power." He was not writing about achievement. He was writing about showing up during the invisible season, when no one is watching and no reward is guaranteed, because that is where character is forged. Many people quit during this invisible season because the human mind naturally craves evidence. We want proof that our effort is working. We want quick results that reassure us we are moving in the right direction. When that evidence does not appear immediately, the mind begins searching for alternatives. People change their plans, abandon their goals, or constantly restart new strategies. The problem with this pattern is that progress requires time to compound. Every time you restart, you reset the momentum you were slowly building. Trusting the process means staying loyal to your path long enough for the results to catch up with your effort. It means understanding that the discipline you practice today may not produce visible rewards tomorrow, but it is still shaping the identity that will eventually create those rewards. Instead of measuring your progress only by external results, begin measuring the quality of your decisions. Ask yourself whether you showed up when you promised you would, whether you maintained focus when distractions appeared, and whether you continued acting even when your motivation was low. These invisible victories matter more than short bursts of visible success. Another powerful way to stay aligned during the invisible season is by protecting your vision. Your vision is more than a goal. It is a mental blueprint of the life you are building and the person you are becoming. Without a clear vision, your attention will drift toward whatever demands your energy in the moment. The world constantly presents distractions disguised as opportunities. New ideas, unexpected requests, and endless information compete for your focus. If your vision is not firmly established, these distractions slowly pull you away from your path. Seneca warned about this with one of his sharpest observations. He said that if a man does not know which port he is sailing to, no wind is favorable. That single sentence explains why so many talented, hard-working people feel lost, despite constant effort. Their discipline is real, but their direction is unclear. Locking into your vision requires clarity about 3 things. First, why your goal truly matters. And this reason must be deeper than external recognition or temporary reward. It must connect to the person you want to become. Second, who you must become in order to achieve it, including the discipline, habits, and mindset that support your future. Third, what actions must be repeated consistently every day. When these elements are clear, your direction becomes stable even when challenges appear. However, even with a strong vision and consistent discipline, failure will still happen. No path toward growth is perfectly smooth. There will be mistakes, setbacks, and moments where your progress feels interrupted. Many people interpret these moments as signs that they are not capable enough or that their goal was unrealistic. But failure is not the opposite of progress. It is one of the ways progress happens. The Stoics practiced a discipline they called amor fati, the love of fate. It did not mean pretending that failure feels good. It meant recognizing that every setback carries something useful inside it if you are willing to look honestly enough. Marcus Aurelius practiced this after every defeat on the battlefield. Instead of blaming his generals or cursing his circumstances, he examined what went wrong, adjusted his strategy, and moved forward with more clarity than before. The difference between those who eventually succeed and those who stop trying is their response to falling. Some people fall once and decide the experience proves they should quit. Others fall, examine what went wrong, and stand back up with more awareness than before. Each time you rise after failure, your resilience grows stronger. Your mind begins learning that mistakes are temporary events rather than permanent definitions of who you are. One helpful approach when setbacks occur is to follow a simple reset process. First, reflect on the situation honestly and identify what happened and what you can learn from it, without exaggerating the failure. Then allow yourself time to rest and recover so your perspective becomes clear again. Next, release unnecessary guilt or shame, because those emotions do not help you move forward. Finally, return to action as quickly as possible. Even if the step you take is small, movement restores momentum. Resilience is built through repetition. Each time you face difficulty and continue moving forward, your brain records the experience as proof that you are capable of recovery. Over time, this pattern becomes part of your identity. You stop fearing setbacks because you know they cannot permanently stop you. They simply become part of the training that strengthens your character. When you combine trust in the process with loyalty to your vision and the ability to rise after every fall, something powerful happens. Your progress becomes steady instead of fragile. You no longer depend on constant motivation or immediate success to keep moving forward. Instead, your identity carries you through uncertainty, difficulty, and delay. Eventually, the results you once waited for begin to appear. The habits you practiced quietly start producing visible outcomes. The resilience you developed through failure becomes one of your greatest strengths. And the person you become through this journey is far more powerful than the results themselves. Because the greatest achievement is not simply reaching a goal, it is becoming someone who refuses to stop growing no matter how many times the path becomes difficult. You feel alone right now because you are becoming someone new. The old version of yourself is falling away, and the world has not yet caught up with who you are turning into. That loneliness is not a sign that something is wrong. It is the price of transformation. Marcus Aurelius paid it inside a military tent. Seneca paid it on the shores of Corsica. Epictetus paid it in a small room in a forgotten town. And every single one of them kept going, not because they could see the finish line, but because they trusted the process of becoming. If these words reached you at the right moment, if something inside you recognized itself in what you just heard, then leave a comment below with the words, I am becoming. Not for me, not for the algorithm, but as a quiet declaration to yourself that the invisible season you are walking through right now is not the end of your story. It is the foundation of everything that comes next. And if you want to continue this journey, subscribe to this channel. Because Stoic Undertone was built for the people who are willing to grow in silence until the world has no choice but to notice. You did not find this video by accident. Something brought you here. And the fact that you stayed until this moment tells me everything I need to know about the kind of person you are becoming.